Alright, so today I was able to do something that I haven't really done that often this year, and that is see a movie that I was actually excited for. Because of my controversial opinion that I really, really love Prometheus. And so, going into this sequel that was just for a while put off as this, basically going to be Prometheus 2, and then they finally decided, well, obviously the secret is out, because back in 2012 and before then they were really, really trying to play up that Prometheus wasn't attached to Alien, when we all knew that it was. It was one of those cases. So they decided, let's just slap the Alien name on it now, but keep going with this theme of the titles being the ships that the crew are on. And they're starting off, though, we kind of abandoned tradition. And because usually we get, like, you know, panning over landscapes, and then we get the cast list, and then it's slowly building the letters, whether it be Prometheus or Alien. And here we get this, I tend to get hung up on opening credits, but it's the introduction to a movie, so they can be very important. And instead we get this scene with a bit of elegance to it, where we go before most of the events of Prometheus, and we see kind of where David came from, and then we jump ahead, and I do kind of feel like, even though it abandons tradition, it is a very interesting opening, and I do like the little effect. It's a bit on the nose, but when David goes and David goes and he hits the first piano note, and the music by credit comes up. So there is, for the most part, even though I was put off immediately because it was like, this kind of feels, it doesn't really feel like we're in that world to kind of start off with, but we do get there very quickly. And so, starting off, one thing you want to look at immediately is, when our movies like this are going to work, obviously there's a lot of things involved. There's the horror aspect, there's a suspense aspect, there's just kind of the visual world, or, yeah, on the outside and on the inside, because even just inside the ship you can still do a lot of stuff. But something that also comes down to is the characters, because when you look at the original movie, there's just 7 characters. We know all their names, and we know what they do and what their personalities are, and that's really all we need. 7 is kind of the perfect number for that. But as these movies go on, our crews are getting bigger, and in this particular case, we have, I think the count was 15, and we know maybe, it's one of those cases where if you don't know the actor, you're basically screwed. It's like, that if you don't know the actor, that person probably doesn't matter. It's basically the case. Unless we're talking about James Franco, who just goes on with his weird career by just having a cameo here. I think he was in the Viral Marketing, but here he's obviously, yeah, the only time we see him conscious is in a video, a whole movie, and it's one of those cases where it was like, when I saw that James Franco was going to be in a movie called Alien, I would have expected more flating guns or shorts of every fucking color, but, you know, it's... but really, our main character, apart from Michael Fassbender's androids, is Catherine Waterston, and she's very... it is clear that pretty much they want to go for a kind of Ripley type, which they kind of mostly avoided with Noomi Rapace and Prometheus, but here... it's very much the way... she's a lot more like Ripley in Aliens than she is the first movie, because she's immediately met with tragedy. Because obviously Aliens begins with, well, by the way, you're in the future, so everything that you knew and loved is, like, long dead now. And obviously Franco's short-lived, or not lived at all, character was her husband, so she's immediately thrust into this story with an instant tragedy. So there's something about her that's very vulnerable at the start, and that's kind of where the most appealing aspects of her character lie. There's a really good scene at the beginning when she's talking to Walter, the other android played by Fassbender, about this log cabin that she dreams of building. And it's a really well-acted scene and really shows a vulnerability of the character that makes you kind of attached to her for the remainder. But it is when we get to the second half, it's like, now we want her to be the badass parts of Ripley, and that doesn't ring true so much. Not necessarily that I don't think Watterson's capable of it, just that, number one, the vulnerability aspects were a lot more effective, whereas it just kind of felt like we kind of rushed her into this, now you've got to be a badass territory, and it just kind of came out all wrong. So I do feel like a bit more of a balance with that probably would have helped this character more. But she's still fine, and Watterson still does everything that she can with the material she's given, pretty much. There's also Danny McBride, who I was really surprised to learn. When you hear that Danny McBride's going to be part of the crew in an Alien movie, you kind of automatically assume he's going to be the comedy relief. But weirdly enough, his character is like played totally straight. He has like one comedic line with the "I never kid about John Denver," but apart from that, he plays it absolutely straight, and he gets one of the more bigger character scenes in the movie where he doesn't even have dialogue. He just has to go into a room by himself and react to hearing something, and it's kind of insane how well he plays it. I don't know that I could have expected that from him, but I mean, I know he did, like, you know, his movie childhood, if you will, was making movies with David Gordon Green, so I suppose we should have known that there's something in him, but yeah, I just was kind of thrown off by how good he is. And he should have had more screen time. He's actually not there enough to really convey what is essentially one of the more well-acted characters in the movie. There's also Billy Crudup as our current captain. And it is kind of funny because even though Billy Crudup is this great, versatile actor, the first thing I jumped to when I heard he was going to be in an Alien movie was Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. And it was like, why do I have a feeling, as soon as I hear Billy Crudup in an Alien movie, I immediately think he's probably an android. No, he's not. He is he is actually the acting captain now, and that almost seems like a missed opportunity, but it is nice to see. This is our perfect segue into Fassbender's double performances. I've been talking a lot the past few weeks about Ewan McGregor on Fargo and how much I love he's able to convey two different characters, playing them at the same time. And the thing is that Ewan in Fargo has two different appearances for most of the show. And here, Fassbender, when we meet David again, it's very interesting because of how distinct they are, because when we saw David in Prometheus, he was, you know, calm and collected, and it was like, he was basically, you know, Ian Holm before he went crazy in the first movie. But it was, when we first meet David, now he's been, you know, isolated for 10 years, and Walter is basically like David was in Prometheus, only less sinister, obviously. And the thing is David, obviously when we saw him, he had modeled himself after Peter O'Toole and Lawrence of Arabia. He had the blonde hair and all that. And now, even though he's a robot, he still has this, for the past 10 years, I've seen some shit look about him. And the way Fassbender plays them, you can tell which one's which, even when, immediately after this, like, one of the first things David does is cut his hair and make himself look like Walter. And so, he doesn't have that safety net to where he has a different appearance to go with a different performance. He looks the same with both of them and has to do two different performances. And it's amazing how well he can do that, because I'm not really Fassbender's biggest fan. I definitely prefer him in supporting roles than I do leading. He's only, no pun intended, he's never been quite that magnetic to me, but here he really is. I thought he was great in Prometheus, too. And now he gets to double down on that with both these characters. And it's definitely, I imagine there's criticism because it's an Alien movie, and now they're not hiding that. But it seems more like the most interesting aspect of the movie is the two androids. And the aliens just kind of exist as antagonists, kind of, you know, just throughout it, sprinkled throughout it. And the main focus here, and it's so, watching these two androids and seeing, like, where David's philosophies had ended up, and how he differs from Walter, who is, like, kind of stronger and more of an updated version of him. And some of these scenes are so bizarre. Like, it gets really damn weird, but in kind of an admirable way. because it's just so... I don't, and that's the thing is, it may say something about the fact that we have 15 human characters in this movie, and far and away the most interesting aspects are the 2 robots, played by the same actor. But I think that's less that the crew is just really, really... I mean, yes, the crew is basically... The main problem I have here is it seems like a lot of the crew is married, and the thing is almost all the female cast is referred to as my wife, and probably some scenes the husbands as well. And it's like, first off, you're never going to learn their names that way, and secondly, that's pretty much the only trait they have, is that they're somebody's wife or they're somebody's husband, and then they're gone, gruesomely. And it's really kind of hard to kind of invest anything in that. There's even a moment where, like, Oscar-nominated actor Damien Bashir, who we love so much, has to react to a character's death, and it's like, even Damien Bashir can't make me care that this person whose name I can't remember is dead, or I can't remember what they did on the ship, what their job was, who they were connected to, nothing. I can't. I know the viral marketing goes a lot into that, but it's still one of those cases, and the viral marketing maybe is like, because they put some stuff in there that would really help you along with some of the things that happen in the actual movie, and I can kind of understand if the viral marketing is like, almost like a reward for like the really diehard fans, for the fans that actually go in and look at all that stuff, how they will kind of be a bit more clued in, but still, it's not necessarily enough to completely alienate, because even the stuff in the viral marketing, the really, really important stuff anyway, is at least slightly touched upon in the movie, if very briefly. So, yes, so what I'm trying to say, I got off on this tangent here, is it's not even that the characters, most of them, are unidentifiable and not interesting, or just anything, but even without them, the androids just interacting is very, very interesting stuff, and it does go into, you can probably say it's like the pseudo-philosophical stuff that people accuse Prometheus of doing, but I mean, like the scene when Walter obviously loses a hand while he's pushing an alien away from Catherine Waterston, and then later David's talking to him about it and David's basically trying to convince Walter that robots can love now, and Walter thinks it was just him doing his duty when he did that, and it's kind of drawing that line where it's like, you're not really sure which one is in the right here in this argument, with how much personality David has taken on, while also very much remaining just an android. And it's Fassbender's performance that really, really makes that believable in a really, really eerie way. So I really love that stuff, and I know the movie is called Alien, but with the way we're going, I actually don't mind, because we know the aliens are just here to kill. Like, there's really not a whole lot of interesting things you can do to expand on the aliens, except multiply them or change their design, or change how they're formed or what it is they do, exactly how they kill people. But with the androids, you have all that room to explore, and I really like that they seem to be going in that direction. Especially since I'm assuming it is still the plan to make this a trilogy. I'm not totally sure. I know that Ridley Scott wants to do, like, I think he's got like 5 Alien movies planned or something. Like, it's basically, he's like 80 now. So when he says that, it's almost like, I wonder if he realizes that he's basically saying he's probably going to make Alien the rest of his career. I think he's got a couple of things planned here and there, but that he clearly has some ideas he's really passionate about if he's going to come out and say, I'm basically going to do this Alien thing until I can't. So it does leave a lot of interest into where this is going to go, because when you look at the aspect, the way they use the aliens in this, which I'm sure is kind of you could say is a huge criticism on the movie, is there's really not a lot you can do, though. That's what they're made to do. They're made to kill or be creepy. And for the most part, because we've been through so many movies now, they're going to lose their creepiness factor. I still think, I heard some criticisms that a lot of people didn't think this movie was scary enough or at all, but I did still find some effective moments in it, particularly the small alien when he first comes out. And he's kind of got that, yeah, the CGI does look off. Like, he's so very clearly animated in a series that's big high point is how amazing these, like, you know, real-looking aliens are when they're actually there on the set. But when you got this tiny little animated thing, they do enough, I think, to balance out that the CGI doesn't look very well. I think the way it crawls really quickly is really freaky, and the sound effects are insane. Like, the sound has always been good on these movies, but I mean, that is just... That is a really, really creepy sound, the noises they make. I know it's just kind of the noises they've always made, but it's never not spine-tingling, that noise. Especially when these tiny little things that can hide in tall grass are making those sounds. It still creeps me the hell out, personally. But, and yeah, maybe it's a lot less scary when they do grow, because as we learned all the way back to the original movie, they grow really damn fast. And there is actually a scene in this movie that I liked because it pretty much echoed... I mean, you could say this is probably criticism because it's like, oh, they're just taking from the original movie. But I like the way it kind of echoed the original movie when Brett, Harry Dean Stanton's character, is killed. Where we basically... Because if we're being real, even when you go back to the original movie, these are, you know, horror movies. At least Aliens is definitely more action. But as far, obviously, sci-fi is like the whole thing here, but I mean, if you're going to go inward more, Alien is pretty much a traditional horror movie, except for the fact that it's an alien and it's set in space. But it's this thing when we go against, the cliche, the horror cliches are in there, but there's also little twists on them, like when Harry Dean Stanton is going through, and it's like he's doing that stupid character thing where even though you know this thing that busted out of John Hurt with the sharp teeth and tail is running around somewhere, he's just going to walk into a dark area by himself looking for a cat. And he's kind of walking around, and he's walking around these big places, and all we hear are footsteps, his voice, and the sound of dropping water. And it's just, you know it's building and building and building, and because you know the horror cliches, you're expecting a big jump scare, because it's just silence, silence, silence while he's looking here and here and here, and he finds the shedded skin so we know it's lurking around somewhere, and it's probably a little bigger. That's great. What's great about the reveals, we don't know how big. And the thing is, the whole time you're expecting this jump scare, behind him, just silently, we see it just drift down like a feather from the ceiling, and it just creeps up behind him. No loud music, no loud noise, it just creeps silently right up on him. And there's a scene just like that in this one, when we get kind of a first-person point of view of the alien, and it's while she's washing her face, and it's sneaking up on her, and we know it. And because not only is it just this movie really does go into the horror territory as far as it's a bloodbath of a movie, much more than the others. And we're expecting that jump scare moment when we see it sneaking around on her. But it does that same thing. There's no jump scare. It just creeps right the fuck up on her. And I really like that they avoided going full cliche there. And it kind of felt like an homage back to that Brett kill in the original movie. I do understand that people are probably put off by how gory this one is. Not necessarily because you're put off by gore, but because of how the original movie was able to be so effective while showing so little of the gore. Like, the goriest thing that happens in the original movie is the John Hurt death. Because we have... The only other one we really see is Brett's death. And the thing about it is... When it creeps up on him... I had this book a long time ago when I was growing up, long before I saw the movie. And in one of the pictures in it, it was like disturbing or scary horror moments in movies or something. And it was a picture of that one moment when the alien has Brett by the head and it grips a hold of him and he's bleeding down his face. And when I saw that picture as a kid, I was like, oh my god, that movie's going to be so gruesome, I never want to see it. And when I finally saw it, you must realize how surprised I was. That picture in that book of gore on Brett is one frame. We barely, like, you have to slow-mo to see that shit. That's how much the gore is hidden in the original movie. And this one just goes all out. Like, obviously, I say the only gory scene, really, is the chest burster. And this movie has, like, 10 chest-bursting scenes in it. Like, that's, like, their main kind of tactic into bringing the gore and the bloodshed out. So I know that there's a lot of things that people didn't like about Prometheus with all these, unanswered questions and all that. And I could go on a whole tirade about that. I may or may not have recorded it, and it went bad, and I re-recorded it, but you're seeing the re-recording now. But the thing is that it is very much... It does go to a point to where this feels more like kind of a standalone horror movie by itself than it does an Alien prequel or a Prometheus sequel. And that's... I suppose that could go one way or another, but as far as franchises go, it does feel like... It feels like a major step down, but I don't think it's a condemning step down by any means whatsoever. There's just very... Like, there's even the scene that... where you could say it like goes full slasher movie and everything, like that complaint that people endlessly bring up about the last third of Sunshine, Danny Boyle's movie. But you could say that about this, and it goes up to the point that two people are killed while they're doing it in the shower. And it's like, that's like full-on 80s horror movie cliche. But it's almost to the point where I want to forgive it, because it's almost like, I find it so hard to believe they just put that scene in a movie like this thinking it's effective, and it's more like, it's gotta be... I know this is a huge cop-out. It's such an apologetic thing to say, but it's like, it could be an homage to 80s slasher movies, that shower scene. It really could. Especially, it's weird that they saved it for the end, too. That's... I don't know. But, so yeah, I actually heard some complaints a while back, like when it was internationally released. And I know some people were saying that it was like, they thought it was too much like the original movie. I really don't... Some certain beats are definitely in there, but I do think for the most part, it doesn't feel... Like I said, it doesn't feel like the world of Prometheus necessarily, or the one in Alien, but there's still enough in there to where you can feel the two connecting. Like, you can feel a connection is inevitable. Like, it feels like we're pretty much there, but there's at least one more movie here that can fill in a full blank. So I guess we'll see what happens. There are certainly moments where the atmosphere... That's one of the things I loved most about Prometheus, is it's atmospheric as fuck. And that one particular scene I do like that felt very much of that world when they're coming... Quite literally. When they're coming in, and like the cloud or the fog parts, and we see the world, and it just feels very much like we're pulled back into that world that we were so relieved to get out of after all the carnage of Prometheus and all the carnage we've seen afterwards. So I really liked the stuff like that brought about that stuff. So I think that's probably about all I wanted to say. There is... Yeah, it needs stronger characters, and they can probably let up on the let's see how much gore and blood we can throw into it, and more on the scares leading up to that, and not just the crew being killed off as gruesomely and graphically as possible, which falls back on, you know, the most rookie mistake of making a horror movie. So yeah, and, you know, kind of, even if you're, like, even, they try to kind of, like, even people who aren't there, like, people who are Michael Beaned out of the movie, like Franco, where it's, because we know didn't we just love the part Hicks played in Alien 3? Didn't we just love that? That's basically what Franco has done here. But they still are able to use him to kind of make Catherine Waterston's part greater and give it more depth. But still, there's no accounting for the fact that most of them are characters we really do not remember at all, for any reason. Carmen Ejogo was in there. I can't tell you off the top of my head what her... Like, I remember seeing her face, like, once. And then it's... But still, yeah, so I don't... Well, no, I do remember who she is, but that would be saying a spoiler, to tell you the only other time I remember her being in it, but... So yes, that is the, this is the very cut-down version of what I said earlier, which, it's, yeah, this is what you're here for. It's very, I understand, it's weird how split it is, because to my understanding, the fans hate this movie, and the critics actually took a liking to it. And it's usually the other way around. I can probably get it from both perspectives. I can totally see why a fan would probably really not like this. But I do, as far as answering all of Prometheus's questions, I do think I mean, there's that stuff like the viral marketing and the deleted scenes, and Ridley Scott's commentary on Prometheus answers some stuff, but for the most part, if you were wondering what a lot of what was going on with David and Prometheus, this might help a little bit, at least. So there is that, but that was never really one of my concerns, because the whole hoping I would get questions answered is not why I love Prometheus. There are many other... I did a whole video on Prometheus that's around here somewhere, but that's its own whole thing. So, the Covenant, I feel like, is kind of right here in the middle. Like, it's somewhere between... Like, it's somewhere in Alien 3 territory. Whether you want to say that's the theatrical cut or Fincher's cut is your decision, but that's where I would say Covenant about it. So... that's what we have here. I think Pirates is next week. Yay, maybe Javier Bardem can bring some class to the proceedings, but we'll see what happens. I finally figured out what Versus is going to be, and that'll be tomorrow. It's probably nothing you're going to be too interested in, but it'll be there for you in case you need it. So, yes, in the meantime, I think that's about it. Obviously, we got Fargo coming next week, and we'll see what happens with that, the second half of the season. So yes, I think that's all that's going on. So, there you go. In the meantime, that's what we have.